On September 11, 2025, Bethan Hardison, activist, asked Yara Shahidi, activist, in a Forbes interview on how she felt about her world right now. Yara answered honestly by saying she is terrified and would like a plan to fix it. I empathize in that no one should have to live in fear. In my opinion, this sounds like a plea for help. I like to help, but how? When Yara Shahidi was younger, she did an equality speech on October 19, 2018 at the Gleason Respect Awards. I argue the speech is the hypothesis to fix her world and reduce her fear. In April 2024, I published my book on Amazon based on this hypothesis, showing that prevention will lead to equity and equity will lead to equality. This hypothesis will fix the political, economic, and social problems in her world and our world. This nonprofit, not edited channel is a letter to Yara Shahidi and teaching Yara's hypothesis to the public in order to better our world. In the end, Yara Shahidi will get the Nobel Peace Prize for her hypothesis. Dear Yara Shahidi, this is chapter 18, Culture and Religious Equality. Part 1 is, there's 3 parts because it's just a very long chapter. Okay, to achieve Dr. King's dream for equality for all, the racism experts said one way to change racism is to change culture. How do you change culture when there are 330 million people in America, or 8.3 billion people in the world, with their own understanding of what culture means to them? Within culture, there is religion, and there are 330 million individuals interpreting how they fit into this universe. This seems like too much of a monumental task to achieve by changing culture and religion to change racism. I argue that culture, religion, and science are trying to achieve the same thing. All 3 are trying to answer the big questions. What happens after death? Are we alone in the universe? Where did we come from? Or my favorite, why are we here? As I mentioned before, culture and religion are personal truths and can be interpreted differently with each person. For example, Christmas can be viewed as a traditional holiday, as a get-together with family and friends, or others can see it as a day off to watch football all day, or others view it as a day to get presents or to get the best bargains on some television sets, or others use it as a religious holiday to celebrate their God, like in Christianity. He was right. Now, to achieve to achieve a Lamana Plus society, culture and religion have to be taught in schools through a science lens. Why is culture and religion needed in a Lamana Plus society? Even though culture and religion are social constructs with personal truths, they do bring comfort to people. Religion and culture bring a clockwork of tradition, so to speak. It shows a reliability in their government at all levels, and that they are protected from any outside threats to practice who they are in whatever form they choose in peace. When people are distressed, religion and culture rituals are a source of comfort, like a child's security blanket. Recent research shows that these culture and religious rituals offer people peace of mind. Rituals offer people peace of mind. Okay. Culture and religious practices are linked to well-being. Research from over 3,000 studies show that 79% of them prove a link between religion and cultural practices that correspond to psychological and physical well-being and longer life. The reason why is because of the social connections that people obtain on a consistent basis by going to their designations of practice. For example, many religions encourage people to take care of their minds and bodies. With social connections, people are able to cope with stress by venting to individuals or groups within that community for social and emotional help. Plus, cultural practices and religions help with social support when needed. They help with economic gifts or organize charities to help raise money for less fortunate. Plus, they help with disaster relief by having sanctuaries ready, like a church or mosque or synagogue, being used as a Red Cross shelter for refugees of floods, fires, hurricanes, volcanoes, earthquakes, etc. In this way, people feel good that they are making a difference to help the people in their neighborhood. This help brings the gift of giving to themselves and to their neighbors through social connections given out by the church, mosque, or synagogue to ensure a long life of well-being for all. With religious and cultural practices being shown to have benefits for society and individuals and needed to be taught in every school across America, then the question is how does one incorporate personal truths from religion and culture into a Lamana Plus society based on objective truths from scientific principles? The answer is to incorporate religion and culture into the students' individual education plan, or IEP, for individual education. In order to answer this question respectively, I will try to incorporate most of what culture is all about and then clarify with religion later. All of this, by the end, will fit into a scientific past, present, and future lens. Culture are shared patterns of behaviors and interactions, cognitive constructs, and understanding that are learned by socialization. In other words, culture encompasses religion, food, what we wear, how we wear it, our language, marriage, music, what we believe is right or wrong, how we sit at the table, how we greet visitors, how we behave with loved ones, etc. As stated before, Lamana Plus has 18 social construct categories that includes 330 million individuals, or 8.3 billion in the world, cultures of America, plus all the students that will do individual education will master a certain subject first, like addition, and then work in scientific groups with these 18 cultural categories from 2 years old to graduation, as stated before. When students work together in this way, they will establish relationships that could last the rest of their lives, like friendships to work, like friendships to work colleagues. It's the way it's written. It's just, you have to modify it. The science behind this group work is called contact theory. God, I love contact theory. Countries with genocides usually have one thing in common, and that is long-standing ethnic and religious tensions. Science is trying to reduce those long-standing ethnic and religious tensions by having people play a game to reduce prejudice and increase empathy. The theory behind this is called contact theory. When people have a lack of empathy for others who are different from them or feel prejudice against them, it is because they do not know them very well. If people were to merely come into contact with those outsiders, then it would stop the feeling of an us-them situation. If people were to merely come into contact with those outsiders, then it would stop the feeling of an us-them situation. Contact theory suggests that contact would only work to increase empathy under certain circumstances, certain conditions, when the groups are on equal footing and sharing a common goal. Yay! The idea behind contact theory is that contact can reduce prejudice. This idea has been around a long time. But what is new is that scientists have the scientific methods and rigor to test their theory in the field on people. The results of contact theory and a study showed a shift in behavior. The study showed that being on a mixed team of different faiths, races, etc., makes a person more likely to go to a social event where people from those groups are present. It makes a person more likely to go to different neighborhoods or different cities, even that are dominated by another group. The study showed a shift in belief that coexistence is possible. Playing on a team with diverse teammates makes a person more likely to say that it's important to treat each other as humans first, as opposed to other community identities. God, it's beautiful. Just so beautiful. Now, this study was done with adults, but when you apply it to 2 years old to graduation in every subject with scientific group work, then you will see the end of racism and Dr. King's dream will come true. Why? Contact theory suggests that contact would only work to increase empathy under certain conditions when the groups are on equal footing, sharing a common goal. Students will master addition on their own first, as an example, and then they will do the students will master addition on their own first, as an example, and then they will work together on the scientific group project using kinesthetic learning, just like the adults did with their soccer game in the study. This means all 18 Lamana Plus people will rely on one another in trying to find an answer to the scientific group project problem, just like the adults did by trying to win their soccer game in the study. With all the students on equal footing, relying on each other and working toward a common goal, like the scientific answer and their grades for passing the class, then contact theory says that these students should become friends by developing empathy for one another. Now, if you can continue this commitment from 2 years old to graduation, then the end result would be like contact theory on super steroids, especially starting so young. With students being taught at a young age about Lamana Plus, then friendships across the 18 social construct categories will be realized with the belief that coexistence is a reality. Now, if you can do this for every school district in the United States across the world, and with every generation into the future, then racism will be a thing of the past. Dr. King's dream will be realized, and then humanity will move into a type 1 civilization. Yay! In order for this coexistence to begin, students have to know about their cultural past. But people across the nation are learning. In order for this coexistence to begin, students have to know about their cultural past. But people across the nation are learning misleading and comforting versions of history that are not true. And an example of this is George Washington. George Washington was a great general who defeated the superpower of the day, Great Britain, and united a country that developed into the United States. This alone would make anyone great, but he was also a tough slave owner. He became a slave owner at 11 years old. Both versions of George Washington should be taught in schools because both are valid in understanding the man. I want to say that slavery is wrong, but if a child was given a slave, then this child would grow up into an adult thinking that slavery was all right. If someone took an fMRI scan of George Washington's head with today's technology, then the prefrontal cortex would not light up dealing with his slaves, and it would light up when dealing with his peers. What I'm trying to argue is that George Washington grew up what I am trying to argue is that George Washington grew up in an immersion of European propaganda of dominance. This is why information is so powerful. If a person gets the wrong information in life, then this person will use it to do the wrong thing, like slavery. This was allowed because George Washington's family, friends, parents, and nation were all thinking and doing the same thing. Yes, there were people against slavery back then, but there was no empathy yet for slaves. The slave narratives weren't around in books during George Washington's youth to start an empathetic campaign like it was 100 years later for the Civil War. Without these slave narratives in books, then the Europeans who owned America then would not yet understand or have the capacity for empathy yet for what the slaves were going through. It is this understanding that is needed in school. Now, if a child of 11 years old of today had Washington's childhood, then I would guarantee they would think slavery was all right too. I will say it again that slavery was wrong and it should have never taken place. This is why teaching the psychology of our leaders is needed to fully understand the history of them as well. This is the good and bad of history that needs to be taught in school. George Washington was a flawed man for owning slaves, but he also was a great man who really did good things. For example, one of his greatest acts was that he turned down a monarchy to become president with honorable term limits. How many people today can say that they would turn down being a king of a nation? I bet you that not many people could do that. In the end, leaders of the past or events of the past should be fully examined for students to understand what truly happened instead of being judged by today's morality and ethics. For the students to truly know history well, they have to know the why behind a history event and then immerse themselves in that time period. With this, people can learn history the right way. With individual education being used, the individual education plan will be prepared to help every individual discover their roots. One of the most fundamental questions needed to be answered by any human is, where do I come from? Students will start with DNA ancestry testing to understand where they fit in the 18 social constructs of Lamana Plus. So why DNA ancestry testing? Research studies show that DNA ancestry tests help people to get to understand who they are, and they understand what makes them different. Plus, the studies also show that the volunteers who did DNA ancestry tests in the studies, when sitting down in a group, can have whole conversations about race and diversity in a way that does not make them defensive when they are presented with the results of their DNA ancestry tests. The DNA ancestry test works with private companies, and they compare the DNA of the person being tested with other groups of people who are alive today. These other groups have had their DNA tested, and they share patterns of DNA that scientists have found to be typical for that region in which they live. These patterns are compiled in a database. When the test is done with the comparisons, then the person being tested gets a detailed map of where they came from. DNA ancestry tests are making people think about their roots, and it helps people appreciate human diversity. It makes people think about their stories in relation to other people through the whole story of human migration. This is why tests are needed, because students will begin the conversations on how they came to be. This is why personal history should be mandatory from 2 years old to graduation. With each new project over the months to years, students will learn the good, the bad of their heritage and express it with others in the Lamana Plus group. If a student can't handle the information from their ancestry's past, then the psychologist from their IEP will be ready to talk to the students in dealing with their past. Just like the volunteers in the studies, the students should see the same benefits from their understanding of history and culture as well. What is a good classroom example of a personal history What is a good classroom example of a personal history for a Lamana Plus person? I am going to use my niece's knowledge on Yara Shahidi's history because I do not really know my own history all that well. This will prove my niece's obsession with Yara. My niece thinks that Yara is perfect and that my niece thinks that Yara is perfect and that I have all the problems needed for a psychologist to fix. Okay, that was pretty funny, but my niece is still annoying. Anyways, I mentioned Yara Shahidi at the beginning of this paper. Yara is an actress and social activist. First, in this class, a student will take a DNA ancestry test. If Yara took a DNA ancestry test, she would be African American, Iranian American, and Native American from the Choctaw tribe. My niece said that Yara's mother is African American and a Native American from the Choctaw tribe, and her father is Iranian American. The next step would be a personal language based on the DNA ancestry test. In this case, Yara would have the choice to learn the Iranian language of Farsi, the African American language of English, the Native American language of Choctaw or English, or she could pick a language of her choosing, like Spanish. My niece said that Yara's primary language is English. My niece also said that Yara learned to speak some languages in high school, and they were English, Spanish 2 honors, and Farsi. My niece said that Yara is not fluent in Farsi and can't read it. My niece concluded that when Yara speaks Farsi, she said she can say greetings, identify things, and send love to people. Next is personal religion for students in this class. Students in this class will choose a religion to study. They can choose their religion from their own personal history or choose none at all. They can choose a philosophy discipline if they want, but they have to choose something. The whole point of this class is to understand other religions. Also, this class will help students discover a spiritual awakening if they can by trying to understand something bigger than themselves, like why are we here? I am going to use my niece's knowledge on Yara Shahidi's religious history because I do not really know my own religious history all that well. I am agnostic, and that is all I know about myself. My niece said that Yara Shahidi's religious family history is Shia Muslim, which is part of the religion of Islam. She also said that Yara's family is Christian as well. This means for Yara to understand her religious background, she will study from the Bible and the Quran. Now, if she wants, she can practice other religion or Now, if she wants, she can practice other. Now, if she wants, she can practice another religion or none at all. Yay! She can choose a philosophy discipline. It is her choice. Now, religious holidays are important to understand for this class as well. If students choose a religion, then they will study and participate in a religious holiday. If Yara chose Christianity to study, then she would learn about Easter and Christmas and the significance they play in the birth and resurrection of Jesus Christ. If Yara chose Islam to study as well, then she would also learn about Mawlid al-Nabi, or the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad revealed the Holy Quran to the Muslim people and introduced Ramadan, which is a month of fasting for increased worship and remembering of Allah or God. My niece said that Yara celebrates Nowruz, or Iranian or Persian New Year. Let me say that again. My niece said that Yara celebrates Nowruz, or Iranian or Persian New Year. This means if Yara chose to study Islam in school, then she would study this holiday by knowing the special significance for Shia Muslims. Since she already participates in the religious holiday festivals, then she would have to understand their significance to the religion as well. For example, she would learn that on March 16, 632 AD, the first Shia Imam, Ali, assumed the office of caliphate. Shia Imani Ismail Muslims around the world celebrate Nowruz as a religious holiday. She would also learn that Nowruz is a celebration of life, the season of spring, health, and getting ready to take on the new year. She would also learn that Nowruz starts with a pre-celebration called Cha Chahar Shunbi. Shanhar Shunbi. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Surrey, in where people jump over fire like mini bonfires. The last thing she would know is that Haji Firuz brings gifts during a 13-day Nowruz holiday in a unifying moment with family and food. Just to be clear, I am talking about teaching religion in school. What about the separation of church and state? Well, this is a fact, but the loophole is that students can study religion from an historical, cultural, literacy, and social development on the U.S. and the world. For example, California has been teaching students about religion in an objective, balanced, and factual manner since 1998. It is incorporated into their holiday social science content standards. In other words, cultural and religious practices can be taught through a science lens. Schools and teachers get in trouble with the separation of church and state when there is an enforcement of one religion over the other. The U.S. military recognizes 221 religions, and they are all celebrated. Now, if schools recognize and celebrate all 221 religions as the U.S. military, then teachers and schools could celebrate and display Christmas trees from Christianity, Hanukkah menorahs from Judaism, and jumping over mini bonfires in Nowruz from Islam. With each student from 2 years old to graduation, the culture and religious significance of it in school is to discover who we are and where we come from. When graduation comes, the student will know as much about their past as Harvard professor Henry Gates. When graduation comes, the student will know as much about their past as Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. does with his celebrity guest on Finding Your Roots on PBS. On this show, the professor provides his guests with compiled research information from U.S. genealogists, DNA dietitians, and ancestry experts from around the world in order to reveal unknown histories and relatives his guests didn't know they had. I know at first the personal history projects won't be as heavily researched as Professor Gates' show, but with time, they should be close to Yara, Shahidi, and Condoleezza Rice's level of personal culture of history. Again, I had to use my niece's knowledge for this example. She made me say this. She's so annoying. Can I get a new niece? Any volunteers? Anyways, an example of this is Yara Shahidi's personal culture of history. Yara's history begins with her mom being an actress and model, her dad being a photographer for Prince, her grandfather being a Black Panther, and her cousin being the first Iranian-American astronaut and the first female private space explorer. My niece concluded by saying that Yara likes eating pomegranates, kebab, and falude, and claims, sorry if I'm saying all this wrong, and claims they are the best desserts ever. With better research, Yara might discover secrets about her past, as Condoleezza Rice did. Condoleezza Rice discovered that her white ancestry owned her Black ancestry before the Civil War. This is the direction I hope the personal projects go, so that each individual will know their past as well. When the individual researches their past, they will be able to connect the dots to the present. They will see that history's progress does not move upwardly toward hope and inclusivity, but it also slides backwards towards war and division. Students have to know that bad history and the good history from the past. Students have to know the bad history and the good history from their past. This truth of history will show the causes and effects. The truth of history will show the causes and effects for students as they see how they got here in the present from the straight line from the past. When students learn about their past, let me say that again. Jeez. The truth of history will show the causes and effects for students as they see how they got here in the present from the straight line from the past. Yes. When students learn about their past, they will see how to improve upon their world. For example, the Constitution is a revolutionary document that maintains a long-lived democracy that is envied by the world. Even with this, the Constitution was linked to slavery and racial inequality from the 3/5 clause to the fugitive slave clause. From the 3/5 clause to the fugitive slave clause. The Constitution both codified slavery and made it harder for individuals to escape it. Even though the Constitution was infused with racism, this does not mean it is a bad document. There were amendments added to it to get rid of the infused racism. This change helped improve upon the greatness that is the Constitution. This is why students learning about their history and the other histories of Lamana Plus will give students ideas to improve upon the present in the form of a job, career, or plight to change the Constitution to achieve equality for all Lamana Plus citizens. I'll just leave it there. This is the end of part 1. So part 2 and part 3 are coming. Ich ni san shi go, kuju, konnichiwa, lalun oui. Hola, buenos dias, adios, we all win together, de nada.